Hello, my brothers and sisters in gaming, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am Jonathan, your host here at QuickBird Gaming. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of QuickBird News. I really appreciate it. In this week's episode, we'll be covering all the gaming news from July 20th to July 26th. We got a few things to talk about. We'll be looking at Wuchang Fallen Feathers and its uneven launch. The censorship campaign against games has claimed another victim. And Elden Ring passes some significant milestones. We'll be talking about all that plus more. As always, each segment of this video has a timestamp down in the description, so feel free to glance down there and see if there's something particular that interests you. But in the meantime, I got to start with my title story, and that is that Xbox, maybe, just maybe, has taken a step back from the abyss. So let's get into it. Okay, right out of the gate, we got to talk about this article from GameSpot, which was published on Wednesday, 23 July. Microsoft confirms no $80 Xbox games after all. The Outer Worlds 2 will not cost $80, nor will any Microsoft game this year. For those who may not remember, when Outer Worlds 2 was announced, officially kind of put its publication date out a few months ago, it was also announced that it would come with a $79.99 price tag, which would mark the first Xbox Microsoft Obsidian game that was coming out at $80. Microsoft announced earlier this year it would begin charging $80 for some of its new games, including Outer Worlds 2. However, that's no longer the case. Obsidian has announced that it will now launch at $70 for a standard edition. A spokesperson for Microsoft told IGN that none of its games will be $80 this holiday. To be sure, no game from Microsoft beyond Outer Worlds 2 was announced at $80 price point. And then this is the official tweet from the Outer Worlds account, basically saying that the pre-order is now be $70. Anyone who pre-ordered for $80 can get a refund from the store they ordered from. And with Outer Worlds 2 no longer retailing for $80, that makes Nintendo's Mario Kart World the only new release from a big publisher going for $80 this year. I have to believe that the player reaction to the $80 price tag has something to do with this, because there has been a lot of negative reaction. There's been a lot of negative reaction in general to the games being floated at $80. And a lot of people were not happy about this. A lot of people questioned this, and I think it affected some of the I think it somewhat affected Outer Worlds pre-orders. From what I've seen, they haven't been that strong, and I have to believe that because people are saying, I'm done, I'm out, I'm not buying at $80, that has led the people at Obsidian, Xbox, and Microsoft to take a step back and say, well, if we keep this out here, we're not going to sell anything. And really, it's not a competitive look, especially when you have games like Balatro, which I think sells at $15 or $20. Schedule 1, it's about the same. Claire Obscure 33, Expedition 33, which sells at $50. There's a lot of good competition out there that's much better priced for the gaming dollar. And let's face it, we're in an era where not everybody has as much disposable income as they did 20 years ago. So people are going to make decisions based on that. Now, I don't think that two things. I don't think that this is some kind of permanent stay. I expect Microsoft will try this again sometime in the future, especially if they see Nintendo doing well with their $80 price tags. But they're not going to do it for now, so it was kind of a step back. And that does mean, as this article pointed out, that only Nintendo is doing this now. EA has said that they will not put anything out at $80 and that they're not changing prices for the near future. I don't think Ubisoft has anything coming out really in the near future to worry about. Or PlayStation's first-party studios, they've not made any announcements that they're going to change. Take-Two is just confirmed in the last few months that Borderlands 4 will be at $70. So there's not, and now Xbox is saying they won't do it. So it's only leaving Nintendo. And Nintendo's kind of a different animal compared to the other gaming companies because they have such a captive market. They could probably get away with this where other games can't. Now, of course, all eyes are going to turn to GTA 6 and how they price that, but that's not going to be out until May, so we probably won't know the pricing on it till after the new year. The other thing that may have hurt Outer Worlds 2 is it is releasing in a very dense time of high-profile games that are coming out somewhere around it. Battlefield 6, Borderlands 4, as I mentioned, Ninja Gaiden 4 is getting its official release, Silent Hill F, Ghost of Yotai is coming out somewhere in the same vicinity, and that may have hurt them too. But I do have to deductively believe that the player pushback and refusal to buy at that price has had some effect. And in that case, you need to make your voices heard. If you don't like the price of the game, you don't buy it, and you make sure the company knows why you don't buy it. Because the power of our wallet and speaking up, that's the only power we have as a consumer. And it's the only way we'll affect positive change. So, you do what you got to do, right? If it's too much, keep your money. Okay, now we have to talk about Wuchang Fallen Feathers. And this game it came out on the Wednesday on the 23rd of July and has had kind of a rough launch, as this article from Thursday, July 24th over at IGN shows that it clocks up 114,000 concurrent player peak on launch day, but reports of poor performance dominate player reviews. And the article points out that it is the 8th biggest game on Steam by concurrent player count, and it's also bested a bunch of other Souls-like games, like Lies of P had hit over 30,000 players, Lords of the Fallen 43, First Berserker Kazan just shy of 33,000. Despite the launch day success, the article says, however, Wuchang, originally released to overwhelmingly negative user reviews on Steam, has since upgraded to mostly negative, as players report issues with extremely awful performance, a completely lifeless main character, and clunky combat and gameplay. At the time of writing, just 21% of the 6,500 reviews left on Steam are positive. And some things people wrote. I was unable to experience more of the fun I was having due to overshadowing performance issues. Unreal Engine 5 games are a hit or miss when it comes to my performance, and this was a miss. And some other things. Now, if you go ahead and go over to Steam, and you can see right now, it is sitting at 35% positive. So it's gone from 21 to 35 after a couple of days. It is doing a little bit better. They patched it the day after, which was the day that article was written, on the 24th, on Thursday. But when you go down and glance at the reviews, you can see, again, people talking about the patch, removing the ability to run at native resolution, so they're getting blurring, and they're getting resolution problems, rendering problems. This next review says basically the same thing. Super sampling resolution limits have been adjusted to prevent unintended performance degradation. Now I'm forced to play blurry 100 FPS mess with forced super sampling. This one says that the delayed the game and not used the UE5 engine. It's unstable and wonky. This one actually says the combat is very disappointing. And then more down here, performance issues, that after the patch note, my gear went missing. So it's having a lot of problems. It's not just on Steam either. You can go over to the PlayStation Store, and you can look at the reviews there. I'll go ahead and scroll down. You can see the ratings. They're very bipolar. A lot of people are doing well, but a significant number of people, a quarter of the reviews, are showing negative, and extremely negative with 1 out of 5 stars. I read that people with PS5 Pros in particular are having a lot of problems with this. So it's having some problems. Now, Lindsay, however you pronounce it, the developer name, has addressed some of these issues, and this was published also on Thursday on the 24th over at Game Rant. Souls-like suffers from disappointing issues on PC, and it talks about some of the same things the IGN article talked about, but it also highlights this tweet from the official account from Wuchang Fallen Feathers that says, as of the patch, and they've addressed some things. The free original costume for the Deluxe Owners Edition, they're trying to get that back on track, and they're offering the original soundtrack to all PC players as a way of small measure of compensation for this game, releasing in such a bad state. It says those who paid for the soundtrack separately will be refunded. Meanwhile, players who purchased Deluxe Edition will also receive a free costume. Okay, and this is after 1.3, and developer Lindsay assured fans that more fixes are on the way and will continue to support optimizations. Typically with a game like this, any game really, there's a finite window for a developer to reclaim their player base when they have a launch. You know, people may point to the redemption arcs, the stories of games like No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077, which suffered really rough launches and ultimately went on to redeem themselves and become very beloved. But those are the exceptions. A lot of times when these games kind of crash and burn on release, especially because of things like performance issues, they don't usually recover. Now, I will say one thing for the Wuchang developers. This is over on the Steam database. You can see that still was 32%, so it's a little behind. But you scroll down and look at the player charts. They're still clocking in at 90 to 100,000 players each night. Enough player each day. Peak. I talk occasionally. Peak number of players concurrently. They're still hitting close to 100,000 each day. A lot of players are not having problems, especially people with really high-end PCs don't seem to be having issues. And as I noted, I think PS5 as opposed to PS5 Pro players seem to be running the game a little better. So there are a lot of people who are still enjoying the game itself, and if they can solve some of these issues, they may still be able to recover. And with this number of players still engaged, they have some leeway. Now, granted, I have heard people speculate that this is due to this high player count is due to a lot of people in China engaging with it, as this is a Chinese game. That may be the case. As games release in China and Steam makes inroads there, they're going to have a bigger presence, and they may be supporting their native developers, or just maybe not having, they're maybe not having as many problems over there. I don't know, but so far they are maintaining a pretty good player count. It didn't fall off a cliff immediately. We'll have to track this and see how it goes over the next week as they continue to patch, and hopefully they will continue to make things better. So, Wuchang Fallen Feathers, we're off to a rough start. We'll see what happens. So the censors have claimed another victim here. This article from Eurogamer, published on Thursday, 24th of July. Itch.io de-indexes all NSFW games, blames same anti-porn group that campaigned against Steam. Now, Itch.io, the digital distribution platform known for its focus on independent game developers and other artists, has de-indexed all adult content following discussions with payment processors contacted by the same Australian pressure group that targeted Steam. And it talks about what Steam did, which we covered last week. Itch.io's response, meanwhile, has been even more drastic. It confirmed the de-indexing, albeit temporarily, of all adult content from its browse and search pages. Okay, recently we came under scrutiny from our payment processors regarding the nature of some content hosted. And they say, now this is the salient point, and this is really the only point that matters as far as the platforms go in this story. Our ability to process payments is critical for every creator on our platform to ensure we can continue to operate. In other words, without their payment processors, operation would be almost impossible for these companies. And provide marketplace for our developers, we must prioritize our relationship with payment partners and take steps towards compliance. And they say it will remain indexed while comprehensive review is covered, blotted. They're going to just do what they have to do here. I'll reiterate, I don't blame Steam or itch.io for doing this. They are kind of beholden to the same thing the rest of us are, in the sense that we have a very oligarchistic banking system set up, where a handful of very powerful institutions have outsized power to control what we do. This is not out of the norm. I think I said this last week too. This is not out of the realm of what Visa and MasterCard normally do, because this is something that works in the literature industry too, and in sites like Patreon. Patreon's come under a lot of fire for some of the stuff they've had on their website, and some of their peers like Buy Me a Coffee, Flat Out State, they do not allow any type of erotica on their website because of payment processor issues. As far as that adult content that involves, say, keeping it in the family, is not allowed on Amazon. So this is not a completely just a video game issue. And to me, it is a symptom of the fact that we've allowed these institutions to have such outsized power, because there's no competition, because the banking industry is so heavily regulated in the United States that forming competitors for these companies is almost impossible. And there's just not enough people that are going to, say, use crypto to pay for their video games on these platforms to make it viable for the platforms to survive on them. They're just not. In an ideal world, at least as far as the United States goes, I can't speak to other countries. In an ideal world, it would be illegal for companies to deny processing payment for any type of legal purchase or activity. Yeah, granted, I don't want them being forced to process payments for crimes that are being committed. But anything that's legal where somebody wants to pay, they should have to accept it as part of being part of the fact that there are only a few of them that will do this. Now, clearly, that's not the case right now, as they're allowed to set these standards that they want to have, and that the reason they don't, and the reason why it's not illegal, because we don't have laws for it. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down as to why that's the case. But that would be the ideal situation here. And so, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to put it, I don't blame the platforms for this, because they really are kind of held hostage to it. Now, if you want to talk about collective shout, we can waste our breath if we want. They're not really worth wasting our breath on. I've never been a fan of these type of puritanical Karen groups that do nothing but shout. I have looked through their website, or glanced through it, I should say, and I didn't find a whole lot of evidence of them helping actual victims of problems. They mostly complain about media. If that is the case, that they have actually done some advocacy or some direct assistance with victim agencies, you can feel free to correct me in the comments and let me know. I recognize that I may have overlooked it. But they do seem more focused on media depictions, to the point where it's further down this article. They say they're against the objectification of women and sexualization of girls. They've called for a ban on GTA 5 and promoting a petition to pull Detroit Become Human, arguing it depicted child abuse and violence against women. Again, more interested in what's happening in the digital world than the flesh and blood humans. These people are really not all that pertinent or valuable, and I hate the fact that they basically run around the free market and get the payment processors involved in a system where we can't really have competition. But that's the way it is. Now, I know, from what I understand, this group has had to lock down some of their social media, including their privating their Twitter account, because of the harassment they've gotten. And all I can say is, it's a fuck around and find out situation. If you don't want the smoke, don't light the fire. That's all I can say. I'm not going to tell you to go out there and harass them. In fact, I don't think you should waste your time. I don't think anybody should be harassed, but I don't feel particularly sorry for them either. Again, I'll say it again. Karens. We live in a Karenocracy, and this is just a further example of it. So we'll see what happens. Further developments, and this may not be the last we hear of this issue. Next up, I have two articles from PC Gamer on Elden Ring, both of which were published on Thursday, the 24th of July. The first one here reads, Elden Ring's DLC has moved over 10 million copies, and Nightreign is already on 5 million sold. And down here, the highlighted section, Bandai Namco has announced that the Elden Ring expansion Shadow of the Erdtree has sold 10 million copies. This follows on the heels of news that Elden Ring itself is over 30 million, and the multiplayer spin-off Elden Ring Nightreign, which released at the end of May, has sold 5 million copies. So I just bring this up because this just shows what a gaming phenomenon and kind of a juggernaut that Elden Ring was and continues to be. And the good news doesn't stop there. We'll flip over to the second article. Elden Ring Nightreign is finally adding its missing duos mode on July 30th. And for anyone who may not remember, when Nightreign released, it had two modes of play, one as single player and one as a trio. But there was no duo, and this oversight is finally being fixed as of the publishing of this video in a couple of days from now. And they say, while Nightreign's 5 million players have proven Elden Ring experiment a successful one, the co-op spinoff has one glaring flaw: no duos. Today we know when Nightreign's original sin will finally be set right. 2-player mode is coming with the next patch, arriving in less than a week. Bandai Namco announced the incoming duo expeditions with an official trailer shortly before Nightreign's launch. Even the game director acknowledged that only recognizing 1 or 3 people was an oversight. So, not only a cultural phenomenon, but a game that just continues to develop. And I think the inevitable Elden Ring 2 we will see sometime in the future, and I'm sure everybody is just keeping their fingers crossed for that. Speaking of hitting milestones, we have this Insider Gaming article that was published on Friday, July 25th. Oblivion Remastered hits 9 million player milestone. Bethesda Game Studios has shared that Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered has hit 9 million players since being released on April 22nd. And it says blah, blah, blah about it. And here is the actual tweet from Bethesda Studios on this issue. Now, we all know that 9 million players doesn't necessarily translate to 9 million copies sold. And I'm sure a lot of these people that were playing it on Game Pass. However, for a remaster that, involved, I don't want to say minimal effort, because I don't want to downplay the effort of the people who remastered it, but relative to launching a new AAA title, it was significantly less effort to remaster an existing title, one that I think sold at $40 when it launched, or was it $50? I don't remember which. The fact that they have had 9 million people engage with it has to be a windfall for Bethesda. And I think that's good news if you want to see a Fallout 3 remaster, because they've got some of these games, they've got kind of a rich library of games that they can remaster, and I think if this one's been a success, they're going to. I personally would love to see a Fallout 3 remaster, because I like Fallout 3, but getting it to run on modern OSs is not always the easiest thing. So I'd like to see them punch that up. But anyway, in fact, they even said it filled gamers everywhere with a sense of hope for further remasters. I'm referring mostly to the rumored remaster of Fallout 3, I would like to see that. But in any event, Oblivion hit 9 million players in the remastered games, which just shows sometimes the oldies really are the goodies. Next up, we kind of have to talk about the mess that has engulfed 1047 Studios and Splitgate 2, and this article from gamesindustry.biz, which was published on Thursday the 24th. 1047 Games sends Splitgate 2 back to beta, announces a new round of layoffs. 1047 Games has announced that its free FPS Splitgate 2 has been pushed back to beta, and the studio will undergo a second round of layoffs as a result. Now, for anybody who's unfamiliar with this, Splitgate 2 has garnered a little controversy this summer leading up to its release. For one of the founders at the Summer Games Fest back in early June walked out on stage wearing a hat that said, "Make FPS great again." And some people were a little put off by that. For one, that's got a political reference in it that is obviously going to irritate some of their fans and viewers. Aside from that, it makes a promise that Splitgate 2 was unable to keep. They said they're going to make FPS great again. The original Splitgate I've seen described as Halo with portals, and a lot of people seem to really enjoy it, and we're looking forward to the second one. However, there's some things that happened that really undermined its success. This article over at Tweaktown from back on June 8th says Splitgate 2 store gets massive discount following backlash over $80 bundle and $34 portal skins. The TLDR says Splitgate 2 developer 1047 Games reduced in-game cosmetic prices by up to 50% following backlash over exorbitant microtransaction costs, including an $80 Nanoswarm bundle originally priced at $145. I know that I believe that people should be able to buy whatever they want. Studios should be able to sell whatever they want. But if you're selling a bundle of cosmetics at $150, the greed is painted plain on your face. It's going to make me look at a company like that with different eyes, because that is just greedy. Now, the founders of the company of 1047 said that they had parted ways with their head of monetization and had since rolled all this back. But that seems like a very careless mistake. And the fact of the matter is, I'm going to come back to this gamesindustry.biz article. They said that in an ex-post published on July 22nd and signed off by studio co-founders Ian Perlew, I think that's how you say that. Now, he's the guy that wore the hat. And Nicholas Bagamian, the studio revealed Splitgate 2 is returning to a beta state following player feedback. We've heard your feedback and we agree with you. We had ambitious goals, and in our excitement to share it with you, we bit off more than we could chew. And that's kind of the bottom line. So they say they're going back to beta, but they also say to accommodate the reworks needed on Splitgate 2, 1047 Games has announced another round of layoffs is on the way just a month after they laid off people in June. And lastly, to retain as many team members as possible, the studio is also shutting down the original Splitgate servers next month. Now, this is where we start getting into why efforts like Stop Killing Games exist. They're going to take the servers offline, and I had seen somewhere in the third week of August, or fourth week of August, I'm sorry, speculated. There's no, I don't think a time has been announced as of the making of this video. They're going to take these servers offline, and everybody that's put all their time, effort, and money in terms of cosmetics into it are going to be voided. When people say Stop Killing Games, they're not saying to people, keep these servers online. They're saying, let us have them. And this bears out when you go over to the Steam reviews. Now, this is the Steam page for the first Splitgate. You can see that it's got about 100,000 positive reviews over the last 6 years. 111,000, total reviews. 91% of those have been positive. Pretty good score. Pretty high marks. But only 72% positive in the last 30 days. And because of reasons that you see here. Shutting down the better game to support an inferior game that lacks the modes in this gameplay has. People sure are, being direct about it. Here, this is from a positive review. A fantastic game killed in the height of its popularity to turn out a sequel no one needed or asked for, with the older game announced to be shutting down out of spite for the second game's monumental failure. 1047 is on the naughty list with how they treated this game. Again, from another positive review. Just give us the means to self-host community service like games have done for decades. Don't let this utter gem die just because you want to double down the sinking ship of the sequel. This is what I'm talking about when people talk about Stop Killing Games. Give the code over to the players and let them run with it. Don't have to support it further. You just say, here it is, this is the state it's in, this is the state it's going to stay in, and you're free to use it, minus monetization, and have at it. There are MMOs out there from 20, 25 years ago that are completely dead and buried that still have private servers running. They're not that hard to find if you look. They're strictly speaking not legal, but the whole point is that people want to keep playing this, and I don't know why game companies hold on to it so zealously and won't allow it. There's some discussion about IP, and I get that, but balanced against the goodwill of your players for a game you're never going to support again anyway, I don't understand why they don't simply allow them to have the code and say, here it is, it's done, we won't be doing anything further with it, you do what you want. But that's neither here nor there. I'm getting off track. Go back over to the Splitgate 2 page in comparison to the first one, and you see 61% positive for all reviews and also recent reviews, so it's been very consistent in the number of people that have liked it. And you scroll down, and the first review kind of says it all. Another victim of trend chasing, and things have gotten worse after the recent update. They talk about, at its core, Splitgate 2 has bold, incredibly smooth movement and gunplay if you're a casual player hopping in occasionally. I never played Splitgate 1, so I can't speak to what issues carried over, but right out of the gate, Splitgate 2 screams just another trend chaser. From its monetization to its menus, it all feels painfully same. Sure, the gameplay stands out enough for some to appreciate it, but let's be real, you don't have the marketing muscle of Marvel Rivals or Call of Duty. You won't land the same collaborations, so why should anyone drop $35 on your Astra bundle for the 4th of July update? So, that's very plain right there. And as opposed to making FPS great again, they seem to have just gone down the same path. Now, going back over the games industry, Biz article, they say they are going to go back to beta and try and fix some of these things. But as I've said before, I believe that once you've burned your bridge with your player base, it's hard to recover. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they can pull out of this doom spiral, or we'll be back in 6 months announcing that they've had further layoffs or a studio shut down. I don't play these type of games, these competitive team multiplayer games, so I don't have a dog in this fight. But I think it is interesting to observe from the outside and see what's happening, and would be interested to see how it turns out. Okay, I'm going to finish up this week's video with two articles about Ubisoft games, both of which, the two games which seem to be going in opposite directions. I'm going to start with this Game Rant article from Thursday, 24th of July. Rumor Star Wars Outlaw sequel has been canceled by Ubisoft. A new report has suggested that Ubisoft canceled a potential Star Wars Outlaw sequel at the early stages of development. The canceled sequel puts K-Vess's journey at risk of being a standalone outing. I'd say that's pretty much a guarantee at this point. It's no secret that Star Wars Outlaws was a pretty significant financial flop for Ubisoft. The game failed to resonate with players despite recent reviews earning it a top critic average. We already know that's worthless and pointless. Let's see. Okay, in this era of gaming, it can be tough to break through to mass audiences without something spectacular. Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson recently mentioned on his podcast that Ubisoft, quote, recently canceled Star Wars Outlaws 2 because that was planned and in the works. It didn't enter production. It was very, very, very early. They looked at Outlaws 2 and thought, let's not do that. Which makes sense. They're better off canceling it at this juncture than putting a couple years into it and, getting $100 million into development before they cancel for a property that really wasn't going anywhere. So Outlaws is probably going to be a standalone, and I doubt we'll see anything further on this property. At the same time, you can look at this article from Video Game Chronicle, which was published on Friday the 25th of July. Assassin's Creed Shadow DLC coming next month with New Game Plus set for next week, adding a new region and 10 hours of content. Claws of Awaji, the first expansion to the latest AC adventure, will be released on September 16th. As was announced before the game was released, players who pre-ordered Assassin's Creed will get the expansion for free. Features a new region, bosses, gear, and the expansion lasts longer than 10 hours in length, according to Ubisoft. It's currently unclear when the new chapter will be accessible. Ubisoft has also published a short roadmap of content for Shadows. New Game Plus will be added on July 29th, so as of the posting of this video in 2 days, which will include a level cap increase, new knowledge ranks, forged levels, achievements, and trophies. At the beginning of September, a new update will allow players to change the time of day, unfog the world map, and have an uncapped frame rate during cutscenes on PC. So despite the fact that AC Shadows got a lot of flack when it released, Ubisoft is still leaning into supporting it, and they still seem to have a fair amount of content to put out for it. And I was one who was kind of unimpressed by the game's performance. It did middling in terms of sales, solid but unremarkable. It wasn't not enough to right the sinking ship that is Ubisoft. But I will note something interesting. If I go over to the Steam database for this page for this game and look, you can see that it's still clocking in roughly 5,000 players a day. And people have not fully abandoned that. And that's just this last week. If we expand this to 3 months, you can see that even that after being on somewhat of a decline through the summer, it's experienced a bit of an uptick in the last month, going from 3,000 to 4,000 daily players to 5,000 to 6,000. So for whatever reason, AC Shadows is experiencing a little bit of an upswing, at least on Steam. And again, I've said before, even if a game is not for me or I don't like the way a company does business, that does not mean that other players can't like it and enjoy it. And apparently people are still enjoying and liking this game, and it's been relatively consistent. So with more content coming out, perhaps it'll pick back up. I maintain that this was not the mega hit that they needed at Ubisoft to undo a bunch of the damage they've already done. But if people are going to enjoy AC Shadows, good on them, and I'm glad to see they're getting more content. That's a win for the players, even if it's a smaller number of players. It's still a win, and we need to take all the wins we can get. Okay, gang, I'm going to leave this week's video here. Thank you for tuning in once again for another episode of Quick Bird News. I really appreciate that. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please consider leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel, or dropping a comment down below. Tell me what you liked or didn't like. If there was a major news story this week I missed, let me know so I can refine my gathering strategy. I appreciate all the engagement, and engagement's kind of the watchword of the day with YouTube. So I appreciate all that, and thank you very much for doing so. All right, we're going to call it here quits. We're going to get back to doing some other stuff. Thank you once again for tuning in. You all go out there, live your best lives, and you all stay gaming.